The evil mirror. Liz had always been fascinated by old antique mirrors, so when she inherited one from her late grandmother, she was thrilled. It was a beautiful piece, ornately carved and with a large oval-shaped glass that reflected everything with perfect clarity. Liz hung it up in her bedroom, taking care to ensure that it was securely fastened to the wall. At first, everything seemed fine. Liz would often gaze at her reflection, admiring herself and her surroundings. But then one day something strange happened. As she was brushing her hair, she noticed movement in the mirror's reflection that was not her own. She turned around quickly, but there was no one there. When she looked back at the mirror, the reflection was back to normal. She shrugged it off as her imagination playing tricks on her and went about her day. But the strange occurrences didn't stop there. Liz started noticing things out of the corner of her eye when she looked at the mirror. She would catch glimpses of movement, but when she turned to face the mirror directly, everything would be normal. She also started feeling like she was being watched all the time, like there was something lurking just beyond her line of sight. Liz had started to feel uneasy in her own bedroom, but she couldn't bring herself to get rid of the mirror. There was something about it that seemed to hold her in its thrall. She would often find herself standing in front of it for hours, just staring at her reflection, and every time she did, she felt like she was losing a little bit of herself. One night, Liz woke up to the sound of whispers coming from the mirror. She sat up in bed, heart pounding, and saw the reflection of a figure standing behind her. From that night on, things only got worse. Liz started having nightmares, and the mirror seemed to be at the center of all of them. In her dreams, she saw the figure from the mirror looming over her with its cold, malevolent eyes. Liz was trapped, held captive by the evil mirror. She knew that she had to break free, but she didn't know how. Every day she felt like she was losing more and more of herself to the mirror, and she knew that if she didn't find a way, soon she would be lost forever. One day, as Liz was gazing into the mirror, she saw something that made her blood run cold. The figure in the reflection was no longer just a vague, shadowy shape. It was now a clear and distinct image of a grotesque creature with sharp teeth and glowing eyes. Liz tried to scream, but no sound came out. She was paralyzed with fear as the creature stepped out of the mirror and into her room. It towered over her, its breath hot on her face, and she could feel its malevolent presence all around her. Just as she thought it was going to attack her, the creature suddenly vanished, and Liz was left alone in her room, trembling and gasping for air. She knew she had to do something. Liz went to the local library and started researching the mirror's history. What she found was chilling. The mirror had belonged to a witch who had used it to summon evil spirits and do unspeakable things. The witch had been burned at the stake, but her mirror had survived, and now it had claimed another victim. Liz knew she had to destroy the mirror, but she also knew that it wouldn't be easy. She gathered all the courage she had and confronted the mirror. She whispered incantations, poured holy water on it, and even tried smashing it with a hammer, but nothing worked. Just when she thought all was lost, a sudden gust of wind blew through her room, and the mirror shattered into a million pieces. Liz felt an immense relief wash over her. She knew she was finally free from the mirror's grip, but she also knew that she would never forget the horror she had experienced, and that she would always wonder if the evil spirit had truly been destroyed, or if it was still out there, waiting to claim its next victim. The Haunted Dol. Megan had always loved antique dolls, and when she saw the one at the garage sale, she knew she had to have it. It was beautiful, with curly brown hair and a frilly pink dress. She thought it would make the perfect gift for her daughter, Lily, who had been begging for a new doll. But as soon as they brought the doll home, strange things began to happen. Megan would wake up in the middle of the night to find the doll moved from where she had left it, and Lily would talk to it as if it were alive. Megan dismissed it as her daughter's imagination, but then she started to hear strange noises in the house, footsteps in the hallway when no one was there, and a cold draft had seemed to follow her everywhere. One night, Megan decided to get rid of the doll. She put it in a box and took it to the attic. But when she turned around to leave, she saw the doll sitting on the floor in front of her. She thought she must have forgotten to put it in the box, but when she tried to pick it up, it wouldn't budge. The doll seemed to be stuck to the floor, and Megan felt a chill run down her spine. She tried to leave the attic, but the door slammed shut behind her and she realized she was trapped. She could hear the doll laughing, a sinister sound that seemed to fill the entire attic. Megan tried to run to the other side of the room, but she felt something grab her ankle and pull her back. She looked down to see the doll's tiny hand holding onto her tightly. Megan screamed, but no one could hear her. The days turned into weeks, and Megan was never seen again. Lily never forgot about her mother, or the haunted doll that had taken her away. She would often hear her mother's voice calling out to her, and she knew that the malevolent spirit that had taken her mother was still there, watching her, waiting for its next victim. Years went by, and the haunted doll became a legend in the town. People whispered about it in hushed tones, and parents warned their children to stay away from the old house on the hill where Megan and Lily had lived. But no one dared to go near it for fear of awakening the malevolent spirit that still lingered there. One day, a group of teenagers decided to test their bravery and explore the old house. They heard about the haunted doll and thought it would be fun to see it for themselves. They entered the house, and as they walked up the stairs to the attic, they could feel a chill in the air, and the hairs on the back of their necks stood up. When they reached the attic, they saw the doll sitting on the floor, just as Megan had left it. One of the teenagers picked it up, and as soon as he did, he felt a sharp pain in his hand. He dropped the doll, and it fell to the floor. With a loud thud, suddenly the doll's eyes started to glow, and it started to move on its own. The teenagers tried to run, but the door slammed shut, and they realized they were trapped. They could hear the doll's laughter, and they knew they were in grave danger. The malevolent spirit had awoken, and it was not willing to let them go. It started to possess their minds, and one by one the teenagers were driven insane. They screamed and clawed at their faces, trying to rid themselves of the voices that whispered in their heads. The days turned into weeks, and the haunted house became a place of darkness and despair. The teenagers were never seen again, and the doll remained in the attic, waiting for its next victims. No one knows what happened to the haunted doll, but some say that it still remains in the old house, waiting for someone foolish enough to awaken the malevolent spirit that lies within. And those who hear the whispers in the night know that it's only a matter of time before they become the doll's next victims. The possessed painting. When Mia inherited an old painting from her grandmother, she hung it up in her living room without a second thought. But soon after, strange occurrences began happening in the house. The painting would change, the colors becoming darker and more sinister, and the eyes would follow her around the room. Mia felt like she was being watched, and the painting started communicating with her, urging her to do terrible things. Mia realized too late that the painting was possessed by a malevolent spirit that refused to leave. As the days passed, the painting became more and more malevolent, its dark and twisted imagery growing increasingly vivid. Mia began to feel like it was watching her every move, its eyes following her around the room with a sense of malevolence that sent shivers down her spine. Despite her growing sense of unease, Mia couldn't bring herself to get rid of the painting. Something about it seemed to hold her in its thrall, drawing her deeper and deeper into its dark and twisted world. As time passed, Mia's behavior began to change. She became more aggressive, more prone to fits of rage and violent outbursts. Her relationships with those around her began to crumble, and soon she was isolated, alone with nothing but the possessed painting to keep her company. And then one day, the painting spoke to her in a voice that was not its own. It whispered terrible things, urging Mia to commit unspeakable acts of violence and destruction. And as she listened, the painting began to transform before her very eyes, its twisted, demonic features growing more and more pronounced with each passing moment. In a moment of sheer terror, Mia realized that she was no longer in control. The possessed painting had taken over her mind, and it was using her as a vessel for its dark and malevolent desires. And as the night fell, and the darkness closed in around her, Mia knew that she was trapped in a world of madness and despair, with nothing but the possessed painting to keep her company for all eternity. The possessed painting continued to exert its influence over Mia, driving her to commit increasingly violent and depraved acts. Her sanity slipped away bit by bit, until there was nothing left of the person she had once been. As the years passed, the painting remained a constant presence in Mia's life, an ever-present reminder of the horrors she had unleashed upon the world. And yet, despite all that had happened, she could not bring herself to destroy it. For Mia, the painting had become more than just a malevolent presence in her life. It had become a twisted reflection of her own inner demons, a reminder of the darkness that lurked within her own soul. And so, she kept the painting close at hand, tending to it with an almost fanatical devotion. It became the center of her world, the only thing that mattered to her anymore. But one day, as she sat staring at the painting, she realized with a sudden sense of clarity that she could no longer live with its malevolent presence in her life. With a deep breath, She reached out and tore the painting from the wall, sending it crashing to the floor, in a shower of shattered glass and twisted metal. As the painting shattered, Mia felt a sense of release wash over her. For the first time in years, she was free from its dark and malevolent influence, and yet as she looked in at the shattered remnants of the painting, she knew that the memories of its horrors would stay with her for the rest of her days. For Mia, the possessed painting had become a symbol of all that was wrong with the world, a reminder that the darkness that lurked within us all could never truly be vanquished. And though she had freed herself from its grip, she knew that the legacy of its malevolence would live on for generations to come. The unseen presence. The Thompson family had always dreamed of living in a grand old mansion, and when they found the perfect one, they were overjoyed. It was a beautiful house, with ornate woodwork and grand staircases, but they soon discovered that something was not right. As soon as they moved in, they felt a strange presence in the house. Doors would slam shut on their own, and windows would rattle in their frames. The temperature would suddenly drop, and they could feel a cold draft that seemed to come from nowhere. At night, they would hear strange noises, footsteps on the stairs, and whispers in the darkness. At first, they tried to ignore it, dismissing it as the creaks and groans of an old house, but the presence grew strong and the family began to feel like they were being watched, and they would often see fleeting glimpses of someone out of the corner of their eye, only to turn and find no one there. They tried to perform a sage cleansing and contacted a paranormal expert, but nothing seemed to work. The malevolent spirit that had attached itself to the family was not willing to let them go. It followed them everywhere they went, hunting their dreams and whispering dark thoughts into their minds. They tried to leave the house, but the unseen presence followed them, and they realized that they had no escape. As the days turned into weeks, the family became increasingly uneasy. They would argue and fight, blaming each other for their predicament. They stopped sleeping and started to see visions of their own demise. The malevolent spirit was taking over their lives, and they knew that they had to do something before it was too late. In the end, the family was forced to leave the house, abandoning all their possessions and fleeing in the middle of the night. But even as they drove away, they could feel the unseen presence following them, watching their every move and waiting for its next victim. No one knows what happened to the Thompson family, but some say that they were driven to madness by the malevolent spirit that had attached itself to them, and those who dare to enter the old mansion now know to beware of the unseen presence that still lingers there. Some say that the malevolent spirit that had attached itself to the Thompson family still haunts the old mansion to this day, waiting for its next victim. Over years, many brave souls have tried to uncover the truth behind the unseen presence, but none have returned to tell the tale. Rumors have it that the malevolent spirit is the ghost of a former owner of the house who was murdered by her husband, and her spirit never left the house. Others say that the house was built on an ancient burial ground, and the spirits of the dead still roam the halls seeking revenge. No one knows for sure what lies behind the unseen presence, but one thing is certain: it is not to be taken lightly. Those who dare to enter the old mansion do so at their own peril, for the malevolent spirit that lingers there is not willing to let anyone leave alive. The townspeople have tried to seal off the mansion, but some say that they still hear strange noises coming from within. They say that the unseen presence still walks the halls, whispering dark thoughts into the minds of those who dare to come too close. For those who are brave enough to venture into the old mansion, they may find themselves face to face with the malevolent spirit that has haunted the Thompson family and many others. But for most, the unseen presence remains just that, unseen, yet always lurking, waiting for its next victim to arrive. The Vengeful Ghost. John and his family were excited to move into their new house. It was a beautiful, spacious home with a large yard and plenty of room for their growing family, but soon after they moved in, strange things began to happen. At first, it was just small things. A door closing on its own, a picture frame askew, but as the days passed, the occurrences became more frequent and more intense. Owen and his wife could hear footsteps in the hallway at night, even though they knew they were the only ones in the house. John became increasingly unnerved by the strange happenings, and he decided to do some research into the history of the house. What he discovered shocked him to the core. The previous family that had lived in the house had been brutally murdered by the mother, who had then taken her own life. The house had been left abandoned for years before John and his family had moved in. John's research also revealed that the mother's ghost was said to haunt the house, seeking revenge on anyone who dared to lie there. John tried to shrug it off as superstition, but he couldn't ignore the mounting evidence that something was terribly wrong. As the weeks passed, the ghost's malevolent presence grew strong. The family started to experience terrifying encounters with the vengeful spirit. The ghost would slam doors shut for objects across the room, and even appear as a spectral figure in the middle of the night. John and his family knew that they were not welcome in the house, but they had already sunk their life savings into buying it, and they had nowhere else to go. They tried to appease the ghost by leaving offerings and saying prayers, but nothing seemed to work. The spirit's wrath only intensified. In a desperate attempt to rid the house of the ghost, John contacted a local paranormal investigator. Together, they performed a seance in the living room, hoping to communicate with the spirit and find a way to make peace. But instead of finding a peaceful resolution, they angered the ghost even further. The ghost anger turned to violence, and it began to physically attack John and his family. They were scratched, shoved, and even choked by an invisible force. It became clear that the ghost had no intention of leaving, and that it would stop at nothing to get revenge on those who dared to live in its home. John and his family realized too late that they were not welcome in the house, and that they were in mortal danger. They fled the house in the middle of the night, leaving everything behind. As they drove away, they could still hear the ghost's vengeful cries echoing through the empty halls. They knew that they would never be able to forget the horror they had experienced, and that they would always wonder if the malevolent spirit was still haunting the house, waiting to claim its next piece. After the terrifying experience, John and his family struggled to find a new place to live. They were haunted by the memory of the vengeful ghost and the fear that they would never be able to escape its grasp. Despite their best efforts to move on, strange occurrences continued to happen to them. They would hear strange noises in the middle of the night and feel a cold breeze pass through their new home. John knew that the ghost had followed them and that they were still in danger. Desperate for a solution, John turned to a group of paranormal experts who specialized in dealing with malevolent spirits. They suggested performing a cleansing ritual to remove the ghost's presence from their lives once and for all. The ritual was intense and lasted for several hours. John and his family had to endure an immense amount of fear and discomfort, but they knew it was worth it if it meant getting rid of the vengeful ghost. Finally, the ritual was complete, and the ghost was gone. John and his family could feel the difference immediately. The air was lighter, and the house felt peaceful once again. John knew that he would never forget the horrors he had experienced, but he also knew that he had overcome them. He was grateful for the help of the paranormal experts and the support of his family, and he was determined to move forward with his life. From that day forward, John and his family lived in peace. They knew that they would always remember the vengeful ghost and the fear it had brought into their lives, but they were also grateful for the strength they had gained through the experience. They knew that they would never forget the importance of facing their fears head-on, no matter how terrifying they may seem.